Hello, everyone, and welcome to this MW talk session where we're going to talk about pitching through a screen, which doesn't necessarily sound like the sexiest topic, but it is all part of our new normal. So firstly, and most importantly, I hope everyone is doing okay out there. I know that there is a lot going on in the world, and this is a very intense time for all of us. So I hope that you are taking time for yourself, for your family and friends, and making sure that you're switching off whenever you can. A little bit of housekeeping as we go into the session. So the presentation will be about 35 to 40 minutes. After that, we'll do Q&A. The Q&A box is now open, so if you want to ask questions, feel free to put them in. We'll get to as many as we can. And now I'm going to do the universally awkward moment of I will start to share the deck with you. Full screen, there we go. So today's pitching through the screen. And I think the first thing that we need to talk about is the fact that this is all very weird. The way that we are communicating with each other, with our clients, and with new business is not the way we would historically do it. We're all about chemistry. Our whole industry, our network, our philosophy is built on our people. It's built on the way that we work and the kind of work that we do. And that isn't necessarily conducive to pitching through a screen. And what we've seen over the last couple of months has been some really great efforts across our markets, across the region and globally, as we've started to engage with how we bring McCann and how we bring ourselves to life in this new virtual world. So basically this session is distilling down some of the best tips and tricks that we've picked up. It's not necessarily rocket science. I'm sure a lot of you will know this. But hopefully the way that we've put this together and we've distilled it down into some key points will be useful. We will be circulating the deck after the session, so feel free to take notes if anything is particularly inspiring, but you will get a copy of the deck. So I do think this is really important as a starting point. The fact that successful pitches are about you, right? That's what clients buy. They buy you, they buy us, they buy what we do and the way that we do it. So that's the thing that always needs to come through with however we're presenting or pitching. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to do great virtual pitches, but at the heart of the best presentations are the ones where we give our clients a sense of what it would be like to work with us. What a sense of the team, a sense of our personalities, and that has to sit at the center of what we do. Because really, a lot hasn't changed about how we pitch. You know, a lot of the core elements that make up a pitch haven't changed, even when we're in a virtual situation. Clients still want us because we're a great creative network and because we bring innovative thinking. And I would say, in fact, what we're seeing now is an even stronger demand from these clients to show that we understand their business, that we understand the challenges that they're facing, and ultimately they want to meet agencies that they can see themselves working with. No matter how slick your Teams meeting is, no matter how slick that virtual presentation is, if they don't like you and they don't feel that they'll enjoy working with you, you won't win that pitch. So how do we make that come to life in a virtual world? So a recent survey basically talked about the fact that, you know, when they interviewed senior clients who had held a pitch in the last 12 months, they asked clients, what do you prioritize when you're looking at an agency presentation? And 35% of brands focused on content, which is exactly what we want. They're the brands that are saying, we want to see what you're generating. What are you doing? 29% wanted to see like an understanding of the brief, right? Which we feel is pretty basic, but we don't always do it that well. So that's what they wanted to see, that we understood what they're looking for. We all know that in every pitch, in every client, there's going to be the clients that want to see the numbers, right? Sometimes it's procurement, sometimes it's a particularly financially focused client. But what is interesting about today is that even with all these other factors at play, over 10% of clients will still judge an agency on the delivery of the presentation. Now, that doesn't mean that we're ignoring everything else, but what it does mean is that we need to make sure that when we present, we're presenting in a way that puts us, our insights, and our ideas at the center of the presentation. Now, the way that we've broken this down for you today, because we love acronyms in our industry and alliteration, we're going to talk about 4 factors. We're going to talk about clients, we're going to talk about content, we're going to talk about coordination, and we're going to talk about chemistry. So let's talk clients. I'm sure all of you are looking at this image and instantly recognizing one of these Lego figures as your clients. But as we know, clients run the gamut, and you're often in a meeting with a wide range of individuals and personalities. It's particularly tricky to navigate this in a virtual world, because what we are very good at is being able to judge a room. And when you're not in the room with the client, it's very hard to understand what they're looking for, what their reactions are to you, and what you're saying. So there is a reality, and I guarantee you right now, there is someone on this call checking their Facebook. I don't know who you are because I can't see you, but I know that you're there, because this is the reality of conference calls. 82% of people are working on something unrelated. So someone on this call is like, oh my God, I have a presentation to finish. She'll never know, right? 65% might be doing other work. 44% are possibly texting. And like I said, somewhere out there, someone is checking their Facebook, and someone particularly audacious is possibly playing some sort of game. So you need to understand that even when you think you have their attention, it is highly possible that part of their brain is somewhere else. So when we're presenting virtually, it's really important to think, what are the key things I need to have? If I'm only going to have that client's attention for 20% of this meeting, what do I need to land with them in that 20% that can win us the pitch? On top of that, and we've seen this a few times, there are boundaries to respect in how we're pitching virtually that we haven't necessarily had to consider before. So one that's really important is time zones. I'm sure many of you have got invites and meetings in your calendars for strange and unusual times of night. You need to make sure that you understand which clients are on the call, what time zones they're in, what is the optimal time for you to be talking with them. You normally are given quite a strict pitch timeline, particularly, and interestingly enough, in a virtual world, we're seeing these timelines, these timings get enforced possibly more than in a physical pitch. We've all run over, right? Anyone who's worked in new business knows when you get extra 15 minutes with the client, it's a great time. Great sign, right? That it's run over, they're still asking questions. A lot of the time when they're running it virtually, because they don't have to worry about agencies passing each other, right? In the client office, which again, we've all experienced before, they are often very strict. So you have to make sure that you're respecting their timelines and their timeframes, right? Another really important thing, make sure that you understand if some of the materials need to be translated. Again, it's a very different experience pitching virtually if they have translators on the other end of the phone or on the other side of the screen. So make sure that you know who is joining from the client side. Do certain materials need to be translated? It doesn't necessarily have to be the whole deck, but it might be core slides. And it's possible that if you do have to do that, you might want to send the deck through ahead of time. So just bear in mind that some of the boundaries that are normally a little more flexible with in-person pitching are maybe not so flexible when you're online. This is a killer stat, and I think we've all been here. 15% of time is being wasted due to technical difficulties. Now, they can be on our side, they can be on their side. Some of it is unavoidable, but some of it you can actually prepare for. Check with the clients in advance. Do they have a particular system they're using? Do we have a system that we prefer? Are we aware of what they're using and have we used it before, right? Ensure that the platform works. Make sure it's downloaded onto all the relevant laptops ahead of time. Make sure it works on any handheld or tablets. And make sure that you understand the standard functionality, right? It's really basic. Make sure you know how to share files. Make sure you know what your audio levels are. And also, and very importantly, make sure you know where the mute button is. Now, if it's a new client, or if we're bringing clients onto our system, it could potentially be Teams, make sure they know how our system works. Talk them through it. It can actually be a great opportunity to get some additional screen time with the clients, to take them through how we're planning to present. Are they comfortable with the technology? And we can walk them through it, okay? Because ultimately, and I say this a lot for everyone who's had the pleasure of sitting through my pitch to win training, ultimately, the pitch is not about us. It's about the client. And we need to make sure that while we come through the screen and while we engage them and we inspire them and make sure that they want to work with us, what we also have to make sure that we're doing is we're demonstrating that we've heard the client. Like I said earlier, clients want to see agencies that understand their brief, but we also have to make sure that in a virtual environment where you can't read body language, right? You can't see that client at the table who's leaning in, trying to ask a question. You can't see the client that's trying to put their hand up, right? You have to make sure that throughout the process, you're giving time to listen to the clients. Okay, so that is the first section. Now we're going to talk about content. So this is a really interesting point. Again, for those of you who haven't sat through my pitch to win training, I always talk about the strategy of one more thing. Now, one more thing is always, what is that thing that we're bringing to a presentation or to a pitch that's going to surprise and delight the client? It can be a truth wall. It can be a mood film. It can be an insight into their business. But always make sure that you come up with something that what we call the unconsidered need. Now, 42% of the marketing leads that were interviewed in the last 12 months about new business, they said you should start your pitch actually with this unconsidered need. You should tell me something about my business, something about my consumer that I don't already know, right? And yet, less than 14% of agencies actually pitch with this, right? So this is a really easy hidden weapon in our arsenal. We have probably the best strategic armory of any network in the world. So when you go in and pitch to a client and you open this deck up and you're sitting in a Teams meeting, imagine the power of being able to say, oh, and before we go into the brief, we just wanted to show you 5 deep dives into your consumers across the market, or here's an insight into e-gaming that maybe you hadn't thought about. Because these kind of things are really powerful, and they're a way to build chemistry and build the belief in McCann and what we do and how we do it in a way that we can't do at the moment because we're not able to be there in person, right? So it's another way of building chemistry and giving them a sense of who we are and how we work. Now, why does it make a difference? because when agencies did come in and have these conversations, the performance reviews, right, were positive in plus 11% in terms of perceived quality, right? They were up 41% in terms of perceived uniqueness. So every other agency shows up and says, here's your brief, here's your deliverables, thank you very much, good night. We show up and say, we're going to get to your brief. We think your brief's great. Before we do, let us talk to you about something else. It gives you an instant differentiator. And what was really interesting too is it increased positivity about plus 10% towards the presenters, right? Now, when we talk about choice measures, we know clients are often navigating between multiple agencies when it comes to choosing who they want to work for, right? So we know that this plus 10% equals a significant boost in purchase intent, right? We are selling essentially a service. That is what we do. And what we're giving them is yet another reason to buy us. So this honestly is a principle that you should be applying to all your pitches, but specifically right now in our virtual environment, it's more important than ever, right? Planning your content. And it comes in a couple of things, right? The reason planning our content is really important is because this is actually a selling point for us, right? When we show clients that we can really instantly understand and utilize the different types of presentation and selling skills that we now have to use, that actually demonstrates that we are a very nimble agency, right? That we are a great partner, that we can pull off great meetings with them, and that we are super responsive. You know, the fact that we can go in and say, we would normally pitch like this, but because of what's happening, we're now pitching like this, is actually a great demonstration how we as a business have managed to move forward with this new normal, and how they're, and therefore how we're a good partner for them in their new normal. So, basics. For the love of sweet baby Jesus, you have to number your slides in two senses. One, it's really important to have numbers on your slides so that all your team members can track the content as you're presenting it. The second number aspect is how many slides are you going to use, right? My general rule of thumb is you should never have ever in a pitch more than one slide per minute. And in fact, you should have 50%. So if you have a 60-minute pitch, in a perfect world, you have 30 slides. And that's a really important thing now more than ever for two reasons. This is very intimidating. It's difficult to stay switched on throughout a presentation. It's difficult to talk a lot, right? I'm already getting hoarse. And it's difficult to hold client attention, right? Like I said, we're sitting here, they're on their laptops, they're on their mobile phones, they're thinking about dinner. So you have to think about how many slides do you actually need to land the point, right? How many points do you really need? How can you make the presentation flow? How can it feel dynamic? How can you explain potentially complex things in a really simple, visually impactful style? And make sure that you're always focusing on the story, right? Make sure that whatever you're showing works in the video conferencing medium. Really complicated slides are very difficult, right? The screens are smaller. We're used to pitching in boardrooms, right? Or in our funky agency offices where we have big screens, right? Everyone now is looking at content on their laptop. And to be honest, I have pitched to a client recently who joined on their mobile. So you have to make sure that whatever you're doing can land in a much smaller piece of visual real estate than you're used to having. So you have to be really brutally, beautifully simple. break it all down, simplify, right? Make sure that as you're presenting, you're constantly navigating the client through the content. Make sure it's color coded. Make sure that wherever possible, you're able to show the client the story as you're laying it out. And if you need to, try to get soft copies to them. Even if you're still at home, you can still get things printed and couriered to clients. If it's a really complex thing and it's a decent sized pitch, that is always another option, is to courier things to their homes. And again, that is something we have done in other pitches. Again, negative space, right? There is a lot to do with piecing, right? Don't be afraid to put slides in your deck that give the team a chance to breathe, right? These are quite intense sessions. Like I said, the presenting to a virtual space, even if you can see the client's face, presenting and pitching like this is very different to how we're used to doing it. We're used to getting energy off our team members. We're used to feeling less on show than perhaps we are when we feel like that little green light is watching us. So don't be afraid to pace the presentation, right? Don't be afraid to fade to black. You know, as you break between sections or sessions, it's not a sprint, right? These conversations need to feel natural because that's what they want. They buy people, right? So don't be afraid to stop for a second. And like I said, make sure the client understands the journey that you're on, right? Signposting. Make sure that the client knows there are 5 sections to what you're going to take them through that day, or 3 sections, and you're going to do this, and then that, and then this, right? This is always a really great way to build a presentation, right? What is your story? But it's really important when you're presenting virtually that you can communicate that properly to the client, because the thing that you don't want is for them to sit there going, wait, when are they getting to that bit? Or when am I seeing my TV? Or are the costs at the back or the front? Make sure that they know what you're showing them, what's coming next, right? Signposting. Again, like I said, presenting through a screen can be very intense. Sometimes it's great to have a video, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be a fully realized mood film. It could be a reference film. It could be a lighthearted film. It could be a piece of work from the network that you think that client would find relevant. It could be our sizzle films. We have many, many sizzle films, right? It's a great way to communicate emotion, right? Particularly when we're trying to sell a big creative platform idea. Video is a great way to bring that to life. But it can also be used as a way to control the mood, right? Particularly if you do have sections of the presentation that are less dynamic than others. It could be great to put a video in there. It gives the team a chance to breathe. It gives the client a chance to process. And it can be a way of adding a bit of sizzle to what otherwise could be death by PowerPoint. But the flip side of that is don't put in a video for the sake of putting in a video, right? What do we want participants to learn from the meeting? So once we've shown them that video, what is their takeout? It's super valid to show them a sizzle film, because our sizzle films are all designed to leave clients with an overwhelming sense of our awesomeness. And we have many sizzle films that are amazing. Okay? What will they know about us that they didn't know before? I hope you all noticed my McCann branded coffee mug. So what is that video telling them? Is it something we should have said, or is it something we should have shown, right? And will it have any impact on the client's viewpoint? If they already know we're awesome, are we reinforcing that? Do they need to understand the scale of our network, that we're in over 35 markets, that we have 3,000 people here just in Asia, that we're the #1 most effective network in the world? What is the thing you want them to take away from that video that they didn't know before you showed it? But if you are choosing to show video, there's a couple of things, right? So first off, again, understand your clients and who is joining that call, right? If they're not fluent English speakers, or even if they are, it is worth including subtitles in the videos. Not all clients are going to turn the sound on for the videos. And also sometimes if we want it to be something they can forward to other members of their teams, it's worth using that version with subtitles in the pitch and also in the follow-up. Okay? Make sure that if you are showing a video, it's not 7 minutes long. Right? Again, you have a limited window of client attention. No one really wants to hear about your feelings. So keep it short and succinct. And also make sure that if you are showing a video, that your platform, your conferencing platform, has the capacity to run that film properly, right? There is nothing worse than watching a film that is like buffering, or that is too slow, or they can't hear the music. If you can't be sure it's going to play well, don't play it. Send it as part of the follow-up, or put a link to it in the chat function, right? Also be aware that not all your clients will necessarily have super awesome bandwidth, right? Or super high Wi-Fi. So even if it works for you, it may not work for your client. So if you're going to use video, make sure you know exactly what that video is going to do. Make sure you know it's going to work, and make sure you have a backup if it won't. Cool. We're 2 C's in, people, not far to go. Okay, so coordination, or as I like to call it, the logistics, right? But coordination fits in with the 4 C's. So making it work. So now we're in the nuts and bolts. So we've talked a little bit about clients and their mindsets and what they're looking for. We've talked a little bit around the content and the kind of storytelling we need to be doing, and the way that we need to kind of help clients navigate through a virtual presentation. Now we're going to talk about what sits under those moments. What do you need to be doing that gets you to the best possible virtual presentation that you can do? Okay, so a couple of things here. You need to assign like a meeting owner. You need to make sure that someone is in charge, right? You need to make sure that you're sharing the meeting structure in advance, not just to the client, but also internally, so that everyone who's joining this call knows how long is the presentation going to be, where are you stopping for questions from the clients, who's doing which bit. Sounds really silly, but I have seen it come unraveled when the transitions between team members don't work. And again, that's a really unfair thing on one level, because we are still working through screens the same way our clients are. But part of what we sell is our teams. It's the way that we work together. So they need to see that. They need to feel like we're all connected and we're all on the same page. We also need to make sure, particularly if it's a big file and you're not sure how well the file might work, or if the virtual presentation is probably a bit spotty, make sure you have a link ready to go at least 30 minutes before that meeting starts, and send it to the clients. Make sure that you introduce all the team members. And there's lots of fun ways to do that, right? You can make it a fun fact. So if you're pitching an ice cream brand, you know, everyone could come on and say like, what's their favorite flavor of ice cream, right? But you need to make sure that everyone who has a role in that meeting has been clearly introduced. And also make sure that internally as a team, you have agreed on the ground rules, right? So like I said, does one person run the meeting and introduce everyone else who's joining? Or do you say everyone introduce themselves with this fun fact? But you need to work out as a team in advance, what is the etiquette about how this session works, right? And it needs to be tailored by client. Some clients are fun and informal, and you can maybe have some people wearing some cute t-shirts and they can have fun backgrounds. If it's a slightly more serious client, you might need to get a little more corporate and get a little dressed up. But you need to agree all these things in advance. Okay? I say this is no different than when we do in-person presentations, but it is even more important now, rehearsing, right? It's super weird to try and build chemistry through a screen, okay? Not just with the client, but also with each other, right? It's really important to make sure that you know which presenters are doing what and when, right? So who is owning which section? How can you make sure, and I've seen this happen, where a presenter has lost, their Wi-Fi's gone down, they've dropped out, and no one's really known the whole narrative of the pitch, right? So the deck's gone because they've dropped off, and now you're sitting there with a client and dead air. So make sure that every single member of the team who will be on that call has a copy of the deck and has sat through a full run through of the presentation, so that if something happens to the presenter for that section, someone else can step in, okay? And make sure who is controlling the charts, who is in charge of the clicking. How do you tell that person to click, right? So if you're feeling particularly sophisticated, you know, you might just nod at the screen, right? And that person's job is to watch and click when you nod. Or you might be more comfortable saying, next slide, please. But again, that's a thing that you as a team need to work out before you go into the room, okay? Again, like we talked about, anything that can go wrong in a virtual world will go wrong. Your batteries are going to run down. Your software is going to crash. The deck's going to corrupt. The creative director's Wi-Fi will go down, right? These are things that will happen. There's a couple of things that you can make sure don't happen, right? We have really good IT. Make sure that you've coordinated with your IT people to test the system, right? To make sure the videos work. Make sure that the platform that you're working on, whether it is Teams or Zoom or Blue Jeans, make sure that that platform is something that you're familiar with and that your IT can talk you through the functionality, right? If it's not our system, please make sure that you understand how that system works, right? It's super easy to go, all video conferencing systems are the same. They're really not, right? And they have weird little foibles and strange little aspects to them. So someone on your team needs to be the tech king or queen, and they need to own that platform and understand how many people are shown up in a square. How big are the thumbnails? Is it a good platform for technology and video? Does it use more Wi-Fi? Does it have a different chat functionality? To help out, we've put together a little cheat sheet here, which talks about the platforms, right? These are the ones that we've seen most commonly used across the region. This gives you an idea of the number of participants who can join, whether or not you can virtually raise hands. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen the raise hand function on Teams. It's caused a lot of people a great deal of joy because they just randomly raise their hands for no reason during meetings now. But it's a useful thing, right? Again, if you're presenting to a new client and you don't know their body language, it could be really useful to have a function where they just press a button and you know there's a question coming, right? How do guests join it? Do they need to download an app in advance? Because if so, you need to tell them that. And again, that's a great win for us to look organized, right? If the client isn't familiar with the platform, you know, make sure that the morning of the pitch, 3 hours before the pitch or the day before the pitch, someone from your team sends the client an email and says, hello, dear client, very excited to take you through our thinking tomorrow. Just a reminder, you need to download it. Here's the link to do so. Our IT are on standby to help you out if you have any problems. Makes us look organized, supportive, tech friendly. Okay. Does it have live captioning? Again, live captioning, as I'm sure you all know from YouTube, can be a little, but it can be an important functionality dependent on the pitch and if people are joining from other markets. The other thing, depending on the client, the type of pitch you're having, is does it have breakout sessions? So some pitches, Blue Jeans, a couple of technologies, enable you to put people in groups depending on the kind of session you're doing, whether it's a full-blown pitch or a chemistry session or a tissue session, you might actually even want to move your client sessions across different platforms, depending on what you're actually using that session for. Okay, checking how we're doing on time. Good, we're on time. The last, and some would say the most important C, which is chemistry. And again, like I said, this whole thing is not how we historically build chemistry. The number one rule of pitching is get the client to your agency, right? Nearly every chemistry session we normally have is held at our agency, right? Because they want to see the physical space that we work in. They want to get a feel for how cool we are. They want to see all our awards in the lobby and have free coffee and stuff. So how on earth, in such a people-driven industry, do you build chemistry through such a non-person-driven technology like virtual conferencing? I'm glad you asked. So there's some really basic fundamentals, right? Which is the less people that they, okay, I don't want to say less. The number of people they meet is really important, right? Because you can't put 10 people on a virtual conference and expect the clients to get a feel for all those people, right? So who is really necessary on that call? Who are the people that you know, A, are comfortable presenting and talking like this, right? No matter how good someone is, this, like I said, this isn't an easy environment in which to let personality and character and confidence come through the screen. So you need to cast for that, right? Who are the people on your team that are comfortable and can build rapport through a screen, right? If we can't build traditional chemistry, what are some hacks, right? How can you fake it? One really good idea is to make a little team video, right? You all have your own little content studio on your phone, right? It's not a particularly difficult thing to get footage of everyone who works on this pitch, working from home. Take some footage of all the Teams calls that you do, right, to work together. Have some funny photos of people at home with their cats. Put it all together, make a super cute little 30-second iMovie, send it to the client in advance, right? Really easy way to do it. The other way to do it is get everyone to take a selfie. Every single person who worked on that brief takes a selfie working from home, and you build it into a picture for the start of the deck so that they can get a sense that, yes, they're only meeting certain key people, but behind them is a whole sense of the wider McCann team that is supporting that endeavour. Okay. Sounds really basic, but show up on that platform at least 10 minutes early, right? If it's our client thing or it's their, or it's if it's the client's platform or it's our platform, make sure that you are all ready and signed in, like caffeinated if you need it, water if you want to do that. You all need to be ready 10 minutes earlier. Again, you will need someone in your team who is like the Time Lord or lady, and their job is to like WhatsApp the whole team like 15 minutes before and say, we are meeting in 5 minutes on the link, see you all there, right? Now this works for a couple of reasons. One, it means you're ready, right? You're not late, you're not flustered. If you can join the meeting early, so if it's a Teams meeting, for example, and we're hosting it, it gives the client a sense that they're coming into us, right? Because the team has met earlier, everyone's chatting, someone's laughing, someone's posted a great cat meme, and all of a sudden they have a sense of what we're like to work with, which is obviously fabulous. All presenters have to be putting live feed on, right? Now, this is a really interesting topic because one of the things that we're talking about as a network is respecting the fact that not everyone enjoys being on camera, right? It can be very confronting. So when we're doing internal meetings, we're trying to give as much flexibility to people. Do they want to turn their video on or off? If you're having a bad hair day, turn your camera off. If you are presenting to the clients, you must have your video feed on, right? You also need to talk about backgrounds. Now, I have a whole suite, courtesy of our lovely Craft Japan team. I have a suite of JPEGs that you can use as your backdrops when you do Microsoft Teams meeting with clients. Everything from creativity is the only way to survive, to the McCann World Group logo, through to Think Out, Work Out, Care, right? So if you want to, the other thing you can do as well is you can actually design your own backdrop, right? I mean, isn't it great for a client to join a pitch and see their logo with the McCann logo as the backdrop of every presenter, right? It's a really simple, easy thing to do to add a new image to Teams because they just updated the functionality like last week. Thank you. But it's not a difficult thing to do, and it's a super simple touch, which means the world, right? If you can't do that for whatever reason, if you're using the client's technology or whatever, please make sure you're aware of your background, right? Make sure that you have neutral behind you if possible. Make sure that you're not too backlit. Make sure you're not too dark lit. Make sure that you understand where you are in relation to the camera, how much of your body is showing, and what else is in the frame. Okay, sounds really obvious, but again, whoever is in charge of like the pitch presentation itself should be in charge of how you're all dressed, what the backdrop looks like, what the lighting looks like. And again, when we talk about rehearsals, that is what we mean, right? You're not just rehearsing the content, you're rehearsing how you interact and work across the screens, right? So again, as I said, someone right now, possibly on this very call, is possibly playing a game or checking their social media. It's really easy to forget that you're on camera, particularly if you're not the one talking, right? And so you sit there and maybe your eyes wander and maybe you pick your phone up and go, I wonder what's happening. Someone is watching, I guarantee you. It may not be the client that you're looking at, but there is a client looking at you, right? So try to stay focused. Try to make sure that you look like you're proactively listening. Have a pen, write some notes, even if you're not really listening, though you should be. Try to always stay focused. It's only 60 minutes. It's only 90 minutes, right? So make sure that you are always acting like you're being watched, because you probably are, right? And again, that doesn't mean be like a boring corporate person, right? Because we're not boring corporate people. It doesn't mean you can't smile at each other or laugh at a team member's joke. It doesn't mean that you can't look cool, like obviously myself. But don't be afraid to let your personality through the screen, right? Again, video conferencing can feel really corporate, right? Corporate isn't what we do. So you need to make sure that when we're thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about the chemistry, right, of who we are. Okay. So again, we can lose the client. So how, because again, there's all these other things going on. They're answering their emails. Sometimes I've been in pitches where clients have actually taken calls. So how throughout the course of a 60-minute presentation do you keep the clients occupied? Okay. So there's a couple. You can use the chat function. You can build polls, right? In many of the chat functions of the virtual platforms, you could build a poll, right? You could design 3 quick answer polls that go at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the presentation, right? And say, we want a quick snapshot. Tell us, you know, who's your #1 competitor, and put 5 options. Or if your brand was a sneaker, would it be a Nike or an Adidas, right? Make sure that you don't have to necessarily wait till the end of the presentation to have Q&A, right? Particularly in a virtual environment, it's a great idea if you have a 60-minute presentation, break the presentation into, you know, 4 chunks or 4 segments of 10 minutes each, and allow 5 minutes to discuss each section. So as you get through, you know, the insight section, rather than go straight into the creative idea, stop and say, any questions? Or we'd love to hear your feedback at this point because we have a question about this, right? You don't have to talk at them the whole time, even though I am now talking at you. right? Make sure you're recording the session. Right? Also, if you're recording the session and, you know, maybe a section doesn't go as well as you want, or you want to edit out something awkward that someone said, which has happened, you can edit the recording, right? You can put a little MW logo at the front and an MW logo at the end. You can record someone opening it and saying, we're so excited, we had such a great time with you. Here attached is the recording of the meeting. Any questions, please let me know, right? Always make sure that the clients give feedback and that you have a strategy for follow-up, right? It can feel very strange, again, in a virtual world, because you kind of go, thanks so much for your time, any questions? And then there's like one awkward client question, and then you go, okay, thanks, and everyone hangs up, right? And you kind of go, ah. So what comes next, right? Make sure that you're thinking about that. Even as you're talking to the clients, make sure someone in your team is taking a heap of notes, and make sure you know when you hang up, what is your strategy for follow-up? That, like I said, could be the recording, or it could be the film that you didn't play, that you say, oh, look, just we mentioned this film during the presentation or this case study. Here's a link, download, love to talk further, right? So always make sure that the client engagement extends beyond that 60-minute meeting, right? Very briefly, and again, like I said, we will be circulating this deck after this call, but India and Singapore have been doing some great virtual pitching very successfully. And interestingly enough, these are two pitches that the teams were quite rightly very proud of, but unfortunately we didn't win. And there are some learnings from both of them that I thought were worth sharing. Okay, so OkCupid. Dating site for those of you who are happily married or not online dating. So one of the things that the team did was, from the very beginning, they lent into the fact that it was a virtual pitch, right? They actually built profiles for themselves. Obviously, as the team was very quick to tell me, obviously making sure that spouses and partners knew that they were making a dating profile, but they actually experienced the group. They basically built a team's experience around it so that everyone could contribute and work. And they had a lot of virtual meetings, right? Throughout the process, everyone came together. Now, virtual living has been a struggle, but the benefit of this has been actually getting everyone to dial in at the same time is sometimes easier than when you're in an office, right? And you're trying to grab someone, but they've gone out for a coffee and someone's gone for a cigarette and someone else is hiding from you. But these things can happen, right? So actually bringing people together is a good way to do it. And they also did role plays. Okay, very briefly, I know we're nearly out of time, right? Where they lost connection with the client was actually the clients didn't engage the way that we wanted them to. They didn't actually, some of them didn't even turn on their video cameras. That becomes a real challenge for us, right? Because we can't read any chemistry from a client that doesn't turn it on, right? The connectivity was a challenge. So the clients kept dropping in and out, right? So again, if you break a presentation into 4 sections of 10, it's a lot easier for us to do that and to recap, rather than you get halfway through the deck, you lose the client, you've got to go back to the beginning. So when you're thinking about how you present to the client, think about the worst case scenario, right? How do you recap each section of your presentation in case a client comes in and out, right? And basically, the opportunity to create chemistry was really struggled, right? So basically, very briefly, and I will skip, I've been told by our producers that we have a few questions. So I won't share the Singapore case study with you, but I will put it in the leave behind because it was very kindly put together by the Singapore team. But in terms of learnings from OkCupid, so essentially it was around making sure that the client understood the technology platforms that we were using, make sure they understood the kind of engagement that we wanted and the way we wanted to work. And again, it goes back to that whole thing of saying, we're going to present this way. Does your current platform support that? If not, we can help you out, right? And also sharing files in advance. Okay. I'm going to click through. I'm going to click through this. I'm going to get to my last slide because it has a cat on it. So I appreciate, after telling you all to pace yourselves, that I have now run out of time, but we do have a few minutes left for questions. So let me check. Okay. All right, I am checking on the questions. Okay. This is quite interactive. I'm checking on the chat. Okay. Oh, all right. Good questions, everyone. I'm scrolling up. This is a good learning. All right. Okay. Good questions, everyone. Excuse me. Okay. Storyboards can drive the slide count up really fast. Are there any tips to presenting storyboards virtually? I'll tell you a really good way of doing it is to actually pre-record that presentation. So if you get your creative team to record the VO and click through the slides, you can actually make it almost into a fake, it's almost a still-o-matic, right? Or a very basic animation. And if you can really dig down into how quickly you can describe that film and storyboard, you can actually make it into a 45-second film that you then play during the presentation. Can we stop in the middle of a presentation to ask them a question? Yes, please. Whoever said that is excellent. Absolutely, you should stop. Particularly if you feel like the clients aren't, if the clients aren't paying attention, feel free to, I mean, obviously don't say, are you paying attention? Because they get really upset, but do feel free to say, do you have any questions? Is there anything we want to recap? A great point from the Singapore pitch write-up, which absolutely you should look at when I send the deck around, is they had code words and like a lot of like a code. So they were all on WhatsApp and they all had code words to communicate throughout the process to make sure that if there was a problem, they could talk to each other outside the client, right? So again, if the clients are all on their phones or they're answering email, do you have a warning code or a symbol that you send to the rest of the team going, we've lost them, how do we reset and bring them back, right? Okay, what can we do when the clients, in particular C-suites who receive gazillions of emails per day, haven't opened and read your email explaining pertinent fundamentals, explaining pertinent fundamentals for the virtual pitch to go smoothly and show up unprepared? Excellent question. So I would say the single best friend that you can make during a pitch is probably the C-suite client's PA, because she's going to be the one that gets it done, right? She's going to be the one, most likely her, could be him, is going to make sure the tech's done. So make sure you know who she is and what her email address is, and make sure she is CC'd on everything, and also call her, right? Because she is your best weapon in that instance. I think the other reality of the situation is assume they're unprepared, right? It's great when they show up prepared, but have a best case and a worst case scenario, right? Excellent point from Mr. Galea. Yes, if you are presenting slides, your thumbnail goes from this to that, right? So that is a really good thing to bear in mind as well. What you think might be obvious in the t-shirt you're wearing or whatever may not actually come through to a client if there's 10 other people on the screen. Is it better to do it live or pre-recorded? I think it's always got to be I think it should never all be completely pre-recorded, which is obvious. I think, again, if it's things like storyboards or creative, sometimes it's helpful to pre-record it. If it's insights and strategy, if you're doing a truth wall, it could be more fun to actually make it, you know, a more animated, dynamic experience necessarily than clicking through slides. But I think it needs to be a balance. And again, like I said, you need to be aware of how well will the videos play on the presentation. Okay, sorry, I'm scrolling down. What are your thoughts on using the chat? All these people ask questions that are very good. And actually, I think I answered, so it might have been asked before, but yes, absolutely. Chat function is brilliant. Whether you're doing polls, whether you're doing interactive questions. You know, one of the things that Sean McDonald talks about from the global team, the global digital leaders, he says, it's a really fun way to open the chat with, get everyone to post a GIF talking about how they're feeling, right? So really simple interaction can be a fun way to open the meeting, right? I do have more examples of what worked and didn't work. I will share this deck and we will keep collating examples. Also, I would ask you, if you've worked on a pitch in the last couple of months and you've gone, I wish we hadn't done that, or I'm so glad we did that because we won, please feel free to share a write-up with me, even if it's just bullet points in an email and you go, Jess, here are 5 things we think people need to know. That would be really helpful. So please feel free to share with me if you have good learnings as well, and I will keep sharing with all of you. Okay, I think that was a very top line response to some very good questions. I didn't get to all of them, so I apologize. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. We will be, oh my goodness, yeah, now I'm doing the wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We will be sharing a recording of this session. We will share a soft copy of the presentation with you as well. Another thing that we will be building out is a pitch checklist, which is a great tool that Perrine on our team is working on, which is just a really nice way of checking through all the things you need to get done when you pitch virtually. That should be done in the next few days, and again, we'll share it. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I hope you enjoyed the session. Feel free to give me feedback, only if it's good. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Please stay tuned for the next MW talks. This is our way of connecting and helping and sharing best practice across the network. Hope you enjoyed it and talk soon. Thank you very much.